In the last brushes and shapes exercise, you actually used one layer. You put everything on one layer because we made our shapes as pixels. This time, as we get started, we're actually going to use shape, and we're going to be able to build layers and be able to move things around. So let's start with a new file. We're going to go ahead and make this one actually not US paper. We're going to do width of 11 inches, height of 8.5, that's 8.5 inches, and then the rest of it will leave default. Let's start by creating a new layer in our layers panel, and we're going to go ahead and name this new layer grass. We're going to use our brush tool, and we want to find the brush that has the grass on it. So right here, right now the font size for that is 134, which is actually a little bit small for what we want right now. So what I want to do is increase the font size to 200 pixels. That makes it a little bit bigger. And one of the things that's nice about using that brush is it will go back and forth between the foreground and the background color. So for your foreground color, I want you to choose a nice green color that would be for grass. The background color, I want it to be kind of a lighter green so that there's a variation in color. Now, we could just paint in that area, but one thing that I want you to understand is if we use a selection tool and select an area down here, we can then use our brush and let me reset my opacity and flow at 100%. Whatever you had it on last time, that's what it opens up to. So check and make sure yours is at 100. But whenever we use a selection tool, it allows you to simply paint in here, and it's not going to allow you to use the brush outside of this area. So I am just going through, and you can see the variation in color due to the foreground and background color, and get that to where there's not any big gaping holes of white. And then you can deselect using Command D. Now, we know that grass doesn't make one straight row or one straight line across the top. So now I'm just going to go through with just one little thing at the top to show, or maybe two, to show some variation. Okay? Now, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to use our selection tool to draw a house. So I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to call this house. And I want to make sure that with my selection tool that I have no feather, and I want to make sure I'm on the new layer, and I'm going to make a square. Now, we know that houses have doors and windows, so I want to use my subtract from selection, and I want to subtract a window, and I'm going to try to make it as even as possible, but I realize it's not going to be perfect, and a door. Now, I want you to notice before you, and I'm going to hide my grass layer so you can see, I want you to notice that I did not bring my door all the way down. There's room down there at the bottom for a little bit of house showing, okay? And I'm going to choose, actually I probably am going to go to my swatches and choose a brown color for my house. And instead of the paintbrush this time, I'm going to use the paint bucket, and I'm going to fill it. And you should notice now that when I fill it, that it allows me to fill just the area that I wanted because we subtracted these two areas. So now I can do a select inverse. It has this and the two windows and the door selected, but it also has outside selected. Okay, so I want to check this contiguous, and I'm going to make this black. Okay, if I had not checked contiguous, notice that it does absolutely everything. Okay, so that's why you have to check the contiguous. Contiguous means that they're next to each other. So that allowed us to click in those three areas separately. Now, we know most houses are not just rectangles or squares. So we want to come down here to our shapes and choose our Polygon tool. And with our Polygon tool, I want to make sure that we have this set as shape. I want the fill to be the same color as the house. So I probably should use my eyedropper tool to select that. I don't want a stroke. And I want my sides at 3 because I want it to be a triangle. Now, first I need to deselect because I didn't do that already. And because I have this set at shape, when I put this on, notice it makes a new layer for me, and I'm able to drag it and drop it. If I needed to rotate it a little bit, I could use my Edit Transform. And notice when I put my mouse around a corner of Edit Transform, I can rotate a little bit at a time. And when you have it the way you want it, you can apply your transformation, and then here you have your house. If you select both layers, you can do that by holding down your Shift or your Command key. You can then merge them. And I'm going to use my Control key. When they're both selected, I can choose Merge Layers, and now it's a house. And it's on its own layer, and that's important because I can now rearrange my house so that things look more realistic. So there's a little bit of grass growing in front of the house. Okay. Now we're going to use our layers to make a new layer at the top called tree, and actually make it tree trunk because we're going to have that as two separate layers. And with the tree trunk, we are going to start with a rectangle marquee, a new selection. I'm going to make a nice, tall, narrow tree trunk. And I am going to use my polygonal lasso tool, add to selection, should be 0 pixels of feather, and I can draw a handful of branches that come out. I don't need to draw that many of them. And remember that wherever you start clicking, you have to bring the tool back to that same spot in order to apply that selection. Okay, so that's going to be my tree trunks. I am going to use first my paint bucket. I'm going to use that same, well, maybe I'll make it a little bit different so it's not the same as the house. And fill it. Now I'm going to keep it selected because now I want to use my paintbrush. I want to use, I think this dry brush and black. Probably change the opacity, let's say 60, oops, and the flow 60. And I want to splatter some texture on there. I want to make it a little bit bigger though. Let's make it right around 100. Doesn't have to be exact, but approximately. And I'm not doing it all over the entire thing, just a little bit. So there's some more texture in some places, less in others. But because I have it selected, it's not letting me go outside of it. Okay. All right, so now is the time for our leaves or our trees. So let's go ahead and make a new layer for our tree leaves. Let's deselect what we have there. And we'll start off with an elliptical marquee and just kind of make a big circle, oval. Mine is kind of hanging off the page, so I want to actually move my tree trunk over just a little bit so that I have more room for some leaves. So I am going to do that. Then I'm going to do the same thing that I did with my tree trunk. I am going to use, actually I'm probably going to use my lasso tool instead. And I want to, I can add to or subtract from. I'm going to go ahead and add to my selection. And I'm just going to draw some little extra circles around just to make it a little uneven so that it's not a perfectly circled tree, top of the tree. Okay. Now we could do the same thing and just fill it with a plain color. Or if we used our brush, we could create some leaves. And I don't know if they're already loaded or not. If you don't see your leaf there, you are going to need to come in here, and you should have it in there from one of them that we set, but it's probably going to be in assorted brushes if you don't see it there. So we're going to choose that. We're going to choose, we're going to make this fall. So we're going to have some yellow leaves. And then for our background color, we're going to have some reddish, real dark red-orange leaves or orange-red. And then we're going to change, we're going to have some oh, that might be having a little too much green in it. Whoops, there we go. Have some various sizes of leaves. Okay, so that default size was a little small, but notice that it uses the foreground and the background color. And once you have what you like, you can deselect. You can then move either piece, whether it's the tree trunk or the tree leaves, and get that in a spot you like. We can rearrange the grass and put the grass in front of the tree if we think that looks better, which I think it does. And then we can move on. Now, for this next part, we're going to choose something that's going to be a little bit different. Okay, so with our brushes, we are going to create our own brush. So let's do a little file anew, and let's create 3 by 3 inches. And there it is. And we're going to use black. And I want you to use the text tool. And we're going to pick a font. You are more than welcome to choose a font. Just make sure it's readable. What do I want to use? Maybe I'll use this one, Luminari. And I'm going to type my name. Oops, except for that's not black. Make sure that you have black selected. You'll be able to apply color to it when it becomes a brush. Okay, I'm actually going to crop this a little bit because it doesn't have to be that.